Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome back. You're watching Women's AM with myself, Ayan, and on the panel joining me we have Sisters Hassana, Zainab, and our special guest today, Sister Tasneem Mustan. Assalamu alaikum, welcome back, sisters. So, Sister, mashallah, we understand that you are a matchmaker, mashallah, and you've been at it for the last 12 years. So, what made you get into that sort of role?
Well, it actually started because I was involved with a lot of the dawah activities at university, and because I was wandering around from uni to uni, I got a chance to work with brothers and sisters from everywhere. And then I came across sisters who were looking to get married, brothers looking to get married, and I thought, hang on, you would be a good match for that person. And literally, that's where it started. I was recommending my friends to people I knew, and then from there they would tell other people, and then it just escalated. And now, 12 years later, I'm still doing the same thing.
Mashallah.
I mean, it must be quite difficult to work with lots of different people. What are some of the kind of challenges that you faced?
People are so different. That is the one thing I've definitely learned. And everybody's looking for something different, even though you would have assumed that everybody's kind of looking, Muslim sister, Muslim brother, you must be looking for the same thing. It's amazing how everybody has such different preferences, and to cater for people's individual kind of needs is the most challenging thing, and also the people themselves, trying to get through to them.
MashaAllah. Well, Jazakallah khair. Moving on now to today's topic, let's go straight to her views, where today we'll be discussing finding a spouse. It goes without saying that marriage is one of the most talked about issues within the Muslim community. The first step towards finding one another's half tends to be a mixed experience from one Muslimah to another. It's not only daunting when one considers the essential characteristics in a spouse, but how do we measure these characteristics in a person? Other questions are, where should we look for a suitable brother in an age where many sisters are flocking to Muslim marriage networks as opposed to traditional methods such as the family? We have much to talk about, but before this, we'll shortly take you to a feature on this matter. Don't go anywhere.
When considering someone for marriage, people often have lists of the different characteristics they are looking for. Appearance, wealth, culture can all be part of the criteria for a future partner, but not everyone values the same thing. In one Iraqi village, a 92-year-old man recently married a woman 7 decades his junior. One of the most prominent figures in his village, he decided to get married 3 years after the death of his first wife, who died aged 58.
I remained alone when my wife died. There was nobody to share anything with. I wanted to have a good time, have some pleasure, but there was nothing. Then God brought her to me, and this is for my pleasure. Is that good or bad?
While some women might question the suitability of such a match, for 22-year-old Muna, the age difference was not an issue.
I accepted to marry him when I saw his pictures, and this was my fate, and I am open and accepting of this marriage. Dr. Hassan and some friends came to ask for my hand. Thank God, I am very happy and satisfied about the marriage.
Musli raised 18 children with his first late wife and lives with his large family of some 325 members. Men in Iraq often have large families and even marry multiple wives.
One of the hobbies for my brothers is polygamy. For instance, my brother Mutar Muslai has 3 wives. My other brother Hussein Muslai is married to 2 wives. Also, Eid Muslai has 2 wives, while the others intend to marry again, after they sort out themselves to become ready for another marriage. Even some of the grandsons of Hajji have 2 wives.
As women, marriage is one of the biggest milestones in our lives. But with so many now struggling to find partners, is our stringent criteria to blame? And are we facing a modern marriage crisis?
Wow, mashallah.
Yeah, no, a very impressive story there. I think living in the West, we can basically just see marriage or relationships for one thing. If it's not for love, or it's not, you know, that kind of aspect to it, then it's no good, and it's something that should be frowned upon. If the age gap is too much or whatever, then it's no good. It just shows that there are different reasons, like you were saying, why people want to get married, and different things that they find attractive. So what is wrong with that at the end of the day, isn't it? So I just think, subhanAllah, these kind of stories that open your eyes to different ways of going about these things.
MashaAllah. Well, before we move on to our discussion, I'd like to tell everyone this is a live show. We'd love to hear from you, so please do call in. The number should be appearing on the screens. So, Sister Tasneem, I'm going to come to you first. Seeing as you are a matchmaker, mashallah, and you've got plenty of experience, what have you found that people are looking for when it comes to the attribute in a spouse?
Okay, when it comes to sisters, I've noticed obviously brothers and sisters look for technically different things. Nowadays, sisters, majority of the time, are looking for financial stability. And it's all to do with whether he can support me, whether he's got an educational background, and also emotional. A lot of sisters, they say, especially as they get older, that I'm just looking for a companion, someone I can be with. Whereas with men, it's the companion issue actually comes first, and then it's the education and everything after that. So sisters and brothers kind of look for different things in that sense. But for some reason, deen seems to be, even though they say deen is the first thing they're looking for, when you get down to it, to their criteria, it seems to be the last thing that they're looking for.
SubhanAllah. I mean, Hassana, do you find that this is the case?
I think it really depends. For a lot of sisters, they do, as Tasneem said, they do kind of say, I'm looking for someone who's practicing. But when you ask them what does that mean, then it becomes quite difficult to actually define, well, who is someone who is practicing, and what are the kind of, are you going for a tick box approach? Because often that's what we find. Okay, yes, he's got a job, a tick box there, and his family seems nice, tick box there. But that's not really the way it should be, because unfortunately, it's not really as black and white as that, and we need to take more of a kind of active approach in this matter.
I mean, it's a good thing that you raise the point of, people say that they're looking for the deen and the character. And this kind of brings me to my next question, which I'm going to ask you, Zainab, is, when it comes to the deen and character, how do you know whether someone is pious, and how much, how can we measure it?
We never really know. Is the short answer to the issue. But the thing is that it's, even though you're not sure, and you're not sure until basically you get married to them and you live with them and you really see what they're like. But the thing is, we still have to be on our, still have to do our best. This is something within our accountability, isn't it? So that means, okay, how do I then try to gauge the things that I want from that individual? The root of all action is always the way that the person thinks. So we need to be trying to think of ways, discussions, questions, whatever you can, in order to try to ascertain what these, how they think, and then from there you can see how they'll behave in these different kinds of situations. So really, first of all, we need to think about, okay, what do I want in a husband, first of all? Someone who knows their roles and responsibilities, you can ask them about that. Do they even know that? You'd be surprised at how many brothers don't know what are the responsibilities of a husband, or even of a wife, for example. There's this kind of old cultural view, and they just kind of stick to that, and they don't question whether that's correct or not. Will he be oppressive? Will he let me out of the house? There's so many ways of questioning them, or just asking them about their general life, about how maybe they have sisters. Do they help their sisters, or do they allow their sisters to leave the house, number one, or do they encourage them to gain knowledge and things like that? Because that will show you that potentially, okay, he's probably going to do a similar thing to me, isn't it? Kindness, thoughtfulness, all these things can be gauged from their work life, their home life, all these kind of things. But another thing is, try to steer away as much as possible from the interview style, because at the end of the day, what we're going to, if you go for a job interview, what you're going to do, you're going to always try to present the best image of yourself, and even try to kind of smudge over the more awkward sides of you. So always for the objective of wanting to get married and wanting to ascertain whether they're right for you, try to have more general chit-chats kind of thing about their daily life, and take your time. I think this is actually very important. Multiple discussions, and eventually, if they are a bit of someone who's kind of hiding something, they will eventually slip up. It's going to happen. But I don't know, maybe you could explain this a little bit more. I don't think most people are like that. They're deliberately kind of concealing something crazy.
The checklist thing as well. It's like sisters they've got a list of questions, and they ask the brother, and the brother's like, wow, your question list is quite long. I don't have one. It's always the case, because the sisters are very well prepared when they're about to go. But unfortunately, they do the interview style, where it is like that. And you should. I always advise people, create a scenario, like you were saying. I remember discussing it with you earlier, that create a scenario for them. Say, well, if this was the case, then how would you respond to this? And it makes the brothers think. It takes them aback a little bit, because they're not used to that. but it just means that sisters look ahead, as always. Women are more sort of long-sighted, they think of the future. Men are more sort of short-sighted, they look at just what's happening now, and they're like, well, I don't know if that's going to happen. And she's like, well, maybe it will. So it's that kind of dynamic that you've got to look out for.
Yeah.
And this thing with the sisters and the mothers, I mean, a lot of people do think, okay, have a look at how he's treating his mom and his sister. But at the same time, a lot of the time what happens is the brothers treat their mothers and their sisters very differently to how they would treat their wives. So I wouldn't always suggest that if they are treating their mother a certain way, or their sisters going out and doing this and doing that, that may not necessarily be that's how he's going to treat you, because the relationship of a wife and a mother is so different from a relationship of a wife.
It's
so
kind of, it's many discussions and many kind of focusing on, like, for example, if you just to randomly talk about something that a sister said, but you know what you're doing, you're trying to see how they would react to that situation. That's something that you can learn from, as well as all these other things. Basically, just multiple questions.
You're right. A lot of brothers do, or sisters do slip up. Like after the first meeting, I remember one person came back to me after the first meeting. But at the end of it, they were like, "Yes, when should we book the nikah date?" And both of them said that. The brother said that, sister said that. And then I spoke to them individually, and I said, "Well, hang on. Have another meeting after that. There's no way on earth that you can judge a situation just by one meeting." And they did. Second, third meeting, fourth meeting, they called it off.
Yeah, I think that's one of the problems, isn't it, within the community, is that we rush into it so quickly, thinking that it's the sunnah to rush into things, but actually we should be really careful of what we're rushing into. Sister Hassana, I wanted to ask you, mashallah, there are a lot of sisters out there who've been looking very serious about finding a spouse and settling down, mashallah. But for some sisters, unfortunately, it can take quite a while and they can get a bit cynical about it. Well, what advice would you give these sisters?
It's a really difficult situation. I think for many sisters, this is a reality. Often some sisters have been looking upwards of about 5 years, 5-6 years. You know, I know of sisters who've been looking for 10 years and unfortunately they haven't found anyone. And I think sometimes the community, friends, family, we can make the situation worse. You know, I've had really, really hurtful comments from people such as, you know, just even asking the question, so when are you getting married? Or even I've heard people say things like, oh, you're going to go past your best before date or something like that. And I just think to myself, subhanAllah, is that the way to speak to someone about this issue? It's just going to make that person even more kind of sensitive about this matter. So I think for many sisters, this is something they're experiencing. But also, I feel like for sisters and brothers, a lot of them have kind of no longer have this belief in the institute of marriage. And it could be because we're seeing so many kind of divorces around us. And I wanted to kind of highlight a statistic on this. Actually, there are 13 divorces an hour in the UK and Wales alone. So when you hear about figures like that, it can put a lot of people off, because they might be thinking to themselves, well, what if that ends up being me? What am I going to do in that situation? So they could be put off from even looking for a spouse, or from kind of, you know, choosing someone or making that final decision, because they're really worried about the consequences of that. So I think that's another part of it as well. You know, I was reading up on this issue, and a lot of people have talked about this because, you know, as the VT clip said, is there a marriage crisis? And it seems to be that there could be. And there was a writer, Heather Lade Jackson, and she says, we're modelling for our community the lack of marriages, single families and broken homes, that good practicing sisters may never get married. So if you're a young girl looking at the life of a mu'min versus the life of the dominant culture, then it could be that the dominant culture would overtake that. So we should not be surprised if we continue on this path. In another generation, we end up with a community who is not getting married. And that is a really, really big problem. So I think there's a lot of issues there of why sisters might feel cynical. But coming back to what you originally, you know, asked initially, which was what advice can be given, you know, it's really, really difficult, because sometimes the advice that these sisters are given is just be patient. And often that can make the situation even worse, because the sister's like, well, I am being patient, give me something practical that I can do. And you want to feel like you're being active in this rather than being passive. So I think definitely patience is important, but there are a number of different things that the sister can do. So I want to say, remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has not denied you something. And you know, there's a really beautiful saying, He has not denied you except to give you. So this means that in the wait, there's something there. There's something of goodness there for you. It could be that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is trying to purify you. He's trying to make you in a better place or a better person, so that when you do get married, you're able to approach it in an even better way. There's a famous poet that once said, if you're irritated by every rub, how will your mirror ever be polished? And it's true. If you get annoyed every time you have to wait for something, something, then there's no way that your inner self will be purified. So I think, you know, kind of look at the weight rather than looking at it as a hardship. Look at it as something beneficial to you, and that will change your whole perspective, and inshallah your whole attitude will change as well.
And